Hey guys, it's Aiko with Schwa Girl. I'm an American English pronunciation coach and business coach based in Hawaii. So, it's already December. I am recording this right now on December 1st. So, we only have like 31 days left in 2019. So, how are you doing? If you are listening to my show for the first time, thank you very much for finding it. I am trying to give useful information for especially Japanese people who are working in an English environment and trying to build their own business. And if you like what I do, I have a Patreon page and you can support my show financially. You can go to my Patreon page, patreon.com/schwagirl, patreon.com/schwagirl. There you can read my mission and vision. So I have 2 exciting webinar/lessons in December. So I'm gonna make an announcement after this guest interview, so stay tuned. Finally, I was able to interview Rochelle Kopp. I have been wanting to interview her for a long time, so finally today I was able to interview her. So Rochelle Kopp is founder and managing principal of Japan Intercultural Consulting, an international training and consulting firm focused on Japanese business. She helps Japanese and people from other countries understand each other's cultures and work together effectively. How Japanese can improve their communication in English is a theme that she frequently consults on and also writes about in books including the best-selling 漫画でわかる外国人との働き方 and 英語の品格. She actually gave me 3 other links to her books as well, so I'm just gonna read it out. So, 反省しないアメリカ人を扱う方法34. That sounds very interesting. And the next one, 英語の交渉直前7時間の技術. And 外国人部下と仕事をするためのビジネス英語指示、フィードバック、業績評価. Yeah, so you can check out all the books on my website, schwagirl.com, or you can check out my podcast page, and I'll put all the links over there. In this episode, she shared 2 concepts that Japanese have, but Americans don't, which I didn't realize those differences. So I actually learned so much from her. You know, I can use those tips in my own life right away. So I hope that you can take advantage of the information that she shared. She also shared some good suggestions for Japanese people who want to improve their communication skills in an English environment. So enjoy the episode with Rochelle. So Rochelle, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So would you please quickly tell us a little bit about what you do?
Oh, certainly. So I'm a management consultant specializing in cross-cultural communication and also organization development. And most of my clients are Japanese companies that have global operations. Also work with foreign firms that are doing business in Japan.
Wow, thank you. So the reason why I wanted to invite you here is to, share some experience, like your experience of like how Japanese people can work in an English environment comfortably. So yeah, so now you live in Japan, right?
Right, yeah, so I'm spending, I go back and forth between Japan and the US, but lately I've been spending most of my time in Japan.
Yeah, can I please ask you, like, when you started living in Japan, what was the like cultural difference that you got surprised? was?
Well, for me, that was I first lived in Japan back when I was in my 20s, and I had a job working at a large Japanese bank. And there were a couple things that were pretty surprising, and one was trying to understand how to do nemawashi, that was considered very important for getting anything done in the company. And I just wasn't familiar with that. When I had worked in American environments, always there was one person who made the decision. And well, who am I supposed to talk to, and how do I do this nemawashi stuff? It was very confusing.
Mhm. Wow. Nemawashi. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. That's like really Japanese stuff. So yeah, maybe we can talk about it later about this, because this is like very important if you do business with Japanese or like with American or mixed environment.
Right,
And what
right.
was the other thing that you got surprised with?
Oh, well, the whole concept of shikata ga nai is very, very different than American culture. In the US, we say, where there's a will, there's a way, or God helps those who help themselves. So we have a really strong belief in the US of anything is possible if you try hard. And so we don't view positively giving up. And so to an American ears, shikata ga nai sounds like giving up. And so I had a lot of trouble when I would hear people say that, because I'd be like, wait, but you can do something. Why don't you do something? Why are you giving up? It was very frustrating for me.
Wow, that's like a really interesting thing that you pointed out too. Yeah, we say shikata ga nai all the time.
Right.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I've been in the US for 19 years now, so I'm getting used to the way of saying like, oh, if there is a will, there's a way.
Uh-huh.
But yes, in Japan, like, oh, shikata ga nai, it happens a lot. So,
Right.
oh wow. So going back to your first point of nemawashi, so how, like, when you found out this cultural difference, how did you overcome this, like, like a culture shock, or like how did you deal with this?
Well, I think in that case for nemawashi, it was more of just trying to get more information, because it was really a technique that I needed to learn, right? And so,
Mhm.
asking my Japanese colleagues and having them give me advice and guidance was really the key thing there.
Oh, I see. So, like, did you find out like on your own
No,
to get?
I had to ask Japanese colleagues. I mean, I learned about the concept from them. They said, "Oh, you have to do nemawashi," and I said, "Well, you're going to have to teach me, because I don't have any idea how to do that."
Wow. Oh, that is so interesting. So, like, so if, okay, so I think coming from like Japanese side, how can Japanese business people deal with this difference in an like American environment?
Well, I think it depends a little bit whether it's a Japanese organization in the US that they're working in, or if they're working in an American organization. So for people in an American organization, it's probably, most important to figure out who the key decision maker is. And it would be more focusing on one person than perhaps you would in Japan. Um, Americans do something like nemawashi, but they don't do it as much. So it doesn't hurt to do it, but I find in the US, rather than nemawashi, there's much more emphasis on discussion in meetings. So you bring everything to the meeting and you discuss it in the open, whereas nemawashi is a much more private type of thing, right? Or happens more in one-on-one or very small groups. So in the US, there's a skill that's needed for having discussion and persuading people in a group setting, much more of a debate or a putting forth your ideas very strongly. So that would be really the emphasis that a Japanese person would need in a US company environment. On the other hand, if it's someone who's in a Japanese company environment in the US, the company is probably still using that Nemawashi process, perhaps in the US, and quite likely with anything with the parent company. So just like my Japanese colleagues kindly taught me about that for Japanese working in the US at a Japanese organization, it's important to really guide your American colleagues so they can understand that approach.
Wow, thank you very much. I am interested in hearing more of your experience of how Japanese people can improve their open discussion skills, because like you mentioned, like nemawashi in Japan is happening more privately. So like in Japan, we don't really have a lot of chances to present our opinions or open discussion like as you mentioned. So do you have any suggestion for them to improve the open discussion skills?
That's a good point. I think it's one of those things that you just have to kind of do it. And so I think a lot of Japanese go to meetings and they see Americans discussing things vigorously, and it feels kind of intimidating or overwhelming. And so then people just kind of pull back and don't want to say anything, right? So I think that it's trying to overcome that feeling. And even if it's just one thing, you're forcing yourself to make some statement or some contribution in each discussion. And if you have something that you really think is important or you care about, to make sure that you're sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. So this is something I am actually trying hard, something to contribute, right? So I learned that it's very hard for me to say my opinions, especially in a group setting, because I'm scared of what other people think about my opinion, right?
Right,
like,
right.
Do they agree or do they disagree?
Right.
But what I realized is that if I don't say anything, they will assume that I don't care.
Right.
So
yes, that's so true.
So that's like American way of thinking. Is that right?
It's definitely true that, because we get trained in school and through our education to have it be very easy for us to say our opinion, Americans tend to assume that everyone can say their opinion easily without any hesitation. So if someone doesn't say their opinion, we'll think they don't care or they don't have an opinion. We'll assume something negative because we think it's just easy to do, right? So that's, I think, definitely the case. And I'd say in general, Americans think that it's easy to talk. And so for people who don't say much, Americans will tend to view that very negatively. So in Japan, if you don't say much, you're quiet. Sometimes being quiet is viewed positively, especially if you're a more senior person. Being more quiet might be viewed as more professional or more appropriate for someone of your position. But in the US, being quiet always means you don't care, you don't have anything to say, you're not friendly, you're not interested. Americans will almost always view it negatively. So, it's interesting, when I talk to Americans who deal with Japanese, I always say, talk less and listen more. But probably for Japanese doing business with Americans, it's the opposite. You need to talk more, right? And so really forcing yourself to do that, because you're right, I think that there's so many ways that Japanese will put a check on themselves. They'll think, oh, maybe what I have to say is not so interesting, or maybe other people aren't going to agree, or the conversation is moving along nicely in this direction, and if I say something, it'll disturb the flow and it'll bother people, or it won't be helpful. I think Japanese find in their minds many, many reasons to not say something. And typically Americans never think of any of those things. We just say it.
Yeah.
If we want to say it, that's the priority, we say it. So there's a really big difference there. And I think that, that those are all the skills that, or approaches that for Japanese in the Japanese environment, that's part of being part of a group in Japan and getting consensus. And so those are all approaches or skills that work really well in the Japanese environment, but they tend to be a handicap in the US environment. So that's where it's really important to be able to switch modes, I think.
Wow, thank you. So yeah, that's a good point. Like talk more. That's something that Japanese should learn in an English environment. So yeah, thank you very much. And how about the other one, 仕方がない situations?
Right.
So how did you deal with this concept when you find out, so this is like a Japanese way of thinking?
I mean, for a long time, every time I heard the word, I would just feel really irritated. And so it was just more a matter of me of realizing that this is something that I needed to accept in Japanese culture, that it was different from my values, but that it's not my job to change Japanese or tell them how they should be. So it was more for me just a matter of acceptance, which is important when there's cultural differences too, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So do you have like suggestion for Japanese people who will be working in an English environment? So now in an American culture, if there is a will, there is a way. So do you have any
Right.
suggestion for them to have this concept?
Right. The thing is, we do have that we do have analogous words in the US, and so one thing that's a really good one is it is what it is. So that's sometimes something that we say in the US that's similar to shikata ga nai. But you don't want to overuse that. And so what I would say to Japanese is realize that fundamentally Americans don't like the concept of shikata ga nai. And so if you feel like you're wanting to say it, you might want to stop and think, is it really shikata ga nai? Or is there something that we could try? Because Americans would probably appreciate more trying in some way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so trying something new would be very, very scary thing, or something different from what they've been doing. Do you have any suggestion for like trying something to work it out, like any mindset suggestion or something you have for them?
Oh, I mean, I just think in Japan, it's so easy to just go to shikata ga nai, because that seems simplest or safest. So I think it's really a matter of thinking, what could be done? Could we talk to someone? Could we ask for something? Is there any room to make an exception? Is there any room to do something special? And I feel like Japanese don't like to ask for things that are special for themselves or their organizations. But in American culture, where we're more individualistic, that would be a perfectly normal thing to do, right? So to realize that maybe some options that wouldn't work so well in Japan actually might work just fine in the US, they might not be a problem.
Wow, yeah, thank you. So, like, just try whatever you think it might work, and just
Yeah, be
if it
willing to
doesn't, it
try.
doesn't, right? So,
If it
yeah.
doesn't, it doesn't, right? It's not a big deal, right? But at least
Mhm.
in the US, I think the point is at least you need to try.
Right. Wow, wow, thank you. So, wow, so you shared so much already, but do you have anything else that you'd like to share for especially Japanese people who are already working in an English environment or who will be working in the US?
Well, I think that really the key thing is to, express yourself more. That in Japanese culture, it's ichi iba juo shiru, right? And so people will, hear one, understand 10, that you don't have to say everything explicitly or clearly in words, right? But in US culture, you have to say all 10, and often we say 11 or 12 just to make sure. And so I think there's really a continuous effort needed by Japanese who are working in a US environment to fill in all those blanks so that people don't need to read between the lines. And that's making everything as clear as possible, right? And
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
probably saying a lot of things in words that in Japanese you would think, well, this everyone knows, there's no reason to say it, right?
Yeah, so we tend to think that probably like, oh, I don't have to say it. It's obvious,
It's
something like that.
obvious, right? Yeah, exactly. And the thing that seems obvious to you actually may not be obvious to someone from the United States.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Actually, expressing yourself is very, very difficult. Like, because I grew up in Japan, so I kind of know why this is difficult, but we are not really trained to express our feelings. But I am
Right,
finding out feelings are very, very important in the US.
right.
So, yeah. So, do you have like some advice for Japanese to be able to express their feelings?
Mm. Well, I think one thing is probably to start with positive feelings, that I feel like Japanese particularly don't put positive feelings into words very well. And so a lot of times that's just even saying thank you, or I appreciate this, or this was really helpful to me. Even something simple like that can be really important. And again, I think a lot of times Japanese don't skip over that. They don't say it because it seems so obvious, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. This can, I mean, I am training myself to express my feelings, but I'm starting with my husband. So
Uh-huh.
it's like maybe we can start within their family
Right. That's a good
first.
place to start. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think
And
even if your family members are also Japanese, saying some of those positive things more clearly, I think other Japanese people will like it too, right?
yeah, that's gonna make a really good, like a positive environment.
Yeah, I think so. So I would start with those positive feelings and working on expressing those.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. So if listeners or viewers want to find you, or in, how and where can they find you?
Let's see. Well, there's always my website, which is www.japanintercultural.com. I'm very active on Twitter, so I have an English Twitter, which is Japan Intercult. So it's JapaninterCult. So that's just abbreviation of my company name. Also, I have Japanese Twitter, that's JIC Rochelle. So it's JICROCHELLE. And I'm on Facebook and also on LinkedIn too.
All right, great. So I'm gonna put all the links on my website too, so people can find you on the internet.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, wow, thank you. So thank you very much for your time, Rochelle.
Well, thank you. It was delightful talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. So that was the conversation with Rochelle. How was it? What was your takeaway? So I put the links to her social media on my website, on my podcast, and also on my YouTube channel, so you can check them out. Yeah, so I have 2 special lessons in December. If you are struggling with English pronunciation, please check them out. The first one is December 7th at 12 p.m. in Japan time. I'm gonna do English pronunciation webinar with Yumi's English Bootcamp. So Yumi and I teach American English pronunciation specifically, and we started out with katakana pronunciation, and we gradually learned pronunciation, and now we won't have to repeat ourselves anymore, and our lives became pretty easy. So if you are having a hard time because you have katakana pronunciation in English, then you can check out our webinar. We're going to share a lot of points for especially beginners who haven't learned pronunciation before, and we will use just easy terms. So I'll put the link here if you are interested in it. And the other one is like live lesson. It's on December 8th at 1 p.m. for 90 minutes. And this live lesson, I invite Takashima Maki, who is a British English pronunciation specialist. And we'll compare British English and American English intonation. Actually, some of my clients ask me if I can teach them British accents. I only know American English, right? So this time I invited a British English accent coach. So here is your chance to know the difference between British English, American English. So both webinars, or I should say like special lessons, are going to be recorded. So you can watch the video later. So even if you cannot attend live, you can actually pay for it and watch the video. So if you have any questions about these events, please contact me through my website. Alright, so thank you very much for watching or listening. I will see you guys in another episode. Bye!